Kim to the R to the Ran.
Yes, you killed it. It's the Lee.
We got this.
Yes.
There's one thing in the drama that makes no sense to me. And that is
TV for you, with you. Hello, welcome to 아란티비. We're incredibly honored and pleased to introduce you to extraordinary attorney Haley Moss. She was diagnosed with autism spectrum when she was 3, and her doctor said if she's lucky, she might hold a minimum wage job and should never make any friends. Now she is the first openly autistic attorney in Florida, USA. She's the real-life U영우 from the Korean drama Extraordinary Attorney U영우, where autistic attorney Woo goes about her life, which is right now #1 on Netflix's most-watched non-English series. Haley's also an author, advocate, speaker, artist, and educator. What an extraordinary guest. Haley, thank you so much for being here.
Thank you so much for having me.
Oh, this is awesome. So I have so many questions to ask and so much to learn. But before we begin, I want to make sure that I use the correct and respectful terms. And I've seen people discuss the terms autistic people and people with autism and people on the spectrum. What would be the most appropriate and why?
It really depends on the person, first and foremost. For me, I refer to myself as autistic because it is part of who I am. I can't separate myself from the autism. I can't just put it down like an accessory and leave it behind. But I know plenty of other people who might use that person first type language, like I have autism or person with autism. Sometimes I might use on the spectrum type language, especially if I don't feel comfortable or I don't know what somebody prefers, but ideally just ask somebody how they describe themselves and just try not to use things that basically kind of avoid the topic. So I personally get offended if someone says things like special needs or different abilities, because disability is not something to be ashamed of. Just say that it's about autism. All of us have needs. All of us are human. Like, it's just that some of us might need more support.
Exactly. Everybody has weaknesses in their own ways. So it's just a matter of maybe how often or how much. And we can't not talk about the drama. I've heard your family watches Extraordinary Attorney U영우. What is the overall impression?
I was like, this is so cool. This is so wild because so much of this feels like my life. And also there's things in it that don't feel like my life. And I find it just so interesting.
So specifically, what are some similarities and differences?
I am secretly really happy that she has the giant headphones. I'm like, yeah, that's me.
Yeah, really?
I do that. It's not just a me thing. This is a universal experience. And I feel better about that. What I also love is that she's so routine driven. I eat the same things most days.
Really? What do you eat?
I eat fruit usually in the morning. I eat a lot of chicken. Like, I eat a lot of the same couple things. I think it's the sensory experience of it. Like, oh, there's new textures, new tastes. How do I eat this? Like, even figuring out stuff like how to twirl pasta was kind of a experience. I was like, what do I do with this? This is kind of intimidating. If someone's going to be judging me for doing this wrong. But we did figure out that there probably is not a dessert that I won't try for some reason, because like I have a sweet tooth. I love dessert. Dessert's like my favorite thing in the world.
High five. Give me a high five.
I feel like you and I will be very good friends then.
Yes,
and when we meet in person, we will have to go get some good snacks.
Exactly. Yeah, I know we have a lot of similarities, and
I know.
Yeah, I feel like we clicked right away.
Like, even just talking to you before the show, I was like, I am going to be friends with you. Like, I just had that feeling.
Yeah, I have the same thing. I'm like, I'm flying to Florida. I'm going to meet her.
Yes, let me know when you do.
Yes, for sure. In the drama, there are so far 2 people that have autism, and U영우 loves whales and the other one loves Pengsu. I was wondering if you are kind of like that and like something very much.
Yes and no. So for me, I will get very intense on something, but it will not last forever. It might last only a couple of years or a couple of months. So when I was younger, some of those things I was just absolutely obsessed with were things like the Harry Potter series or Pokemon. But I don't think it borders on that same level of obsession that it does for U영우. Like, it will interrupt what she's doing in her daily life. That she has this need to think about whales. Like, that doesn't happen to me. What felt really wild to me about her obsession with whales. So Whales was my childhood nickname. So I'm like, this is too weird. Like, there's too many things about the show that kind of freak me out. I'm like, how do they know this about me? How do they know that my name used to be Whales?
Oh, that's so funny. And I know that you also have photographic memory.
Mhm.
What is it like and how did it help you?
It's helpful in a lot of situations, especially with work. And I used to do drama when I was in school. So I used to act in all the school plays. So memorizing all the lines was super easy. And I didn't really have to work very hard at it. And I didn't have to try too hard in school a lot because I would just memorize everything. It feels like your head is almost like a giant library. Weird thing about me is I am very bad at faces. Most people are very good at faces and can't put together names and details. I'm the exact opposite. It's kind of this reverse process for me. And it just goes to show how unique our brains are.
Oh, that's so funny. That's interesting. You know, in the drama, Woo learns emotions by using these pictures of her dad's facial expressions. And, you know, each picture had a word like anger, and this one is sadness. You know, like, did you have to learn emotions in that way?
I think a lot of autistic kids have a very similar experience to those flashcards. If you're rolling your eyes, you might be bored. And that's so not natural to a lot of autistic people. And it's also very different from culture to culture. I have to learn this.
Just like I had to learn the American gestures.
Mm-hmm.
You know, I didn't automatically know what, you know, this meant. Or rolling eyes, that's not a thing in Korea. So I'm like, what does that even mean? Like, are you
exactly? And then
are you confused?
That it feels very similar. A lot of the times, it's almost like being a second language learner. What you think is common sense is probably not common sense to me.
Kind of get it. I'm curious, what were some differences and what was something that was maybe unrealistic?
There's one thing in the drama that makes no sense to me. And that is the way that Woo walks. Like her gait is very pronounced. Her movements are very kind of, I don't know how to describe it, but when you see it, you know, even just the way that she moves to the world looks very different. And I don't know any autistic people who walk like that. I'm like, she doesn't have a physical disability. Why are they portraying it this way? It doesn't really make sense to me.
I see.
Like autism is not per se a physical or visible disability in that way, which makes that really kind of strange to me, unless they're trying to imply that she has another disability or to make it obvious in some other way. I don't quite understand why that is. But that I think is very different from real life, at least to me. Like if you just see me kind of walking around, you're not going to think anything is different. We look like people. I'm usually nervous when autism shows get a lot of popularity because a lot of them aren't very good as far as like representation, and they get so much wrong. I felt that same fear before watching the drama, and I was like, wait, this is actually good.
Oh, wow.
And I was relieved. I was relieved. Like there are still things that I think people like me that are very involved in the disability activism and advocacy are going to be very critical of. But I also think, generally speaking, there's a lot that the drama does very, very well, and boundaries that I'm surprised it pushed, and I'm glad that they did. The episode with Peng Su, Attorney Wu, even mentions that whole thing about Hans Asperger and how 80 years ago, the way that we would have treated autistic people is very different. Our lives might not have been viewed as being worth living. I was like, I can't believe they just went here, and I'm so glad they did. I'm like, yes, thank you. Because when I say it, it seems almost scary to people, but seeing it on TV makes it real. I think about that episode a lot. Something else that I know that people are very critical of with the show is they think that it's fantasy because everybody's very accepting. I do think that to an extent, and the creators address that. This is fantasy, but she already deals with enough hard stuff. We don't want to give her a villain and make it harder. And I was like, that's a great idea. I wish more of the world was like that in real life.
Right. So I would like to hear more about the hardships that you experienced, because autism is translated as 자폐 in Korean, and that means to be closed to themselves. And obviously the spectrum is very wide, and it seems like you're where it's hard to tell that you're autistic. Everyone's hardship is different, but I would like to hear yours if you've ever experienced, you know, difficulties or discrimination. I would like to hear more.
Oh my gosh, there's so much to unpack in that question. I love when you were explaining what the translation of autism is in Korean and about this kind of being closed off to oneself. I find that really interesting because I think it does in so many ways sum up the autistic experience. It also gets it wrong at the same time. Because I think for me, that closed offness is there's this hesitancy to trust people sometimes. And also that it feels like a lot of times there's disconnect between your brain and your mouth. There are things that are in my head that I don't always know how to express. And I struggle with a lot of just like basic adult stuff, I feel like. It's this concept known as executive functioning. And basically it's your brain's kind of like control center. And sometimes it feels like it's very broken. My brain makes it hard.
I think it's great that you understand that and you understand that about yourself and you can expect certain things and you can maybe prevent some things too. But back in the day, you know, people really didn't know what autism really was. I've seen one of your parents' interviews and they mentioned how their friends and even families thought that it was contagious and they wouldn't invite you to their birthday parties. And that just broke my heart.
Oh my gosh. Yeah. People just don't understand stuff. And especially you have to remember the late 1990s were a very different time. We did not have the same access to everybody being on the internet, everybody understanding things the way that we do now.
Yeah, it wasn't they were more evil than
they just didn't know.
I hope this educates people more. Since the drama, I think more people want to learn about autism, which is
I think so too.
Positive. And the fact that the main character is disabled, I think that's just very unique and wonderful.
It's unique, especially because it's a woman, especially with autism, that most representations that you get in TV and movies are always men. And they always fit a stereotype. You don't usually get women, you don't usually get adults, and you usually don't get somebody who is in law or a creative field or something else. And I'm also just like, yes, thank you. Thank you for not making me think that I am an outlier of some sort, because if you put together a lot of kind of traditional autism representations on TV, you can like stitch together a little boy who flaps his hands all the time and loves trains. We are not just one stereotype, just like all other people.
Right.
We're all individuals.
So what makes autism autism? What is in common?
That is a great question. Communication, social skills, executive functioning, sensory differences, like a lot of these different areas, those are things that all of us have in common. People often think it's a line, is they think there's people at this high end of the line and the low end of the line. But with this other kind of way of describing it is some people look at it more like a color wheel, and that you have places that are at different parts on that wheel, depending on the day or depending on what somebody is dealing with and what their strengths and weaknesses are. I also realized depending on the day or how tired I am, that my functioning can change just like anybody else. So that low to high thing just doesn't help any of us, if you ask me.
Totally. And in the drama, you know, U영우 has a best friend and she's developing this romantic relationship. And a lot of people do say that it's unrealistic, it is a fantasy, and I do agree that it is hard for a lot of autistic people because it is hard for them to socialize and read social cues.
It is hard.
Yes.
It is hard, but you still find your people. You still make friends. Her best friend also reminded me of people that I was friends with when I was in school. So that kind of just protectiveness and things like that. Like it reminded me of a lot of people I know. And I am rooting for her in her romantic relationship. U영우 deserves love just like everybody else. I have had romantic relationships. I know it's possible. I know plenty of autistic people who are happily married, who have kids, who didn't know they were autistic when they were married and had kids until their own children got diagnosed. There's so many of us who do have that success. And the reasons that people don't is not only do you have people that aren't understanding, but there's other reasons that people don't get married. If you are someone who receives like government help for your disability, like if you're receiving Social Security in the United States, that's stuff that can be kind of taken away from you if you get married. So there's a lot of people who don't get married for that reason. But that's a conversation for another day. Public policy is a whole other kind of rabbit hole to go down, for lack of a better description.
How was autism seen and treated in your family? It seems like your parents
My family's great about it.
Yeah?
I just would not be where I am or the same person without them. So I am eternally grateful. And they never made me think that I was weird or strange or like less of a person. I was very confident. That's something we don't often get because the world has a way of trying to tell you something is wrong with you. You need to be somebody else and don't be yourself the way that you are because people will reject you. And I never got that from my family.
Wow. Yeah. Tell us how your parents taught you different was not better or worse?
I was about 9 years old. I was obsessed with Harry Potter at the time. My mom sat me down and she relates it to Harry Potter. He's different from the people he lives with. He's different from the other wizards, but he's still the hero of the story. He's still important. He's still loved. He still has friends. You have magical powers. And of course, being a 9-year-old kid, I believe this.
Very extraordinary, right?
That's why I love that the show even is like extraordinary.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and you said how your story is powerful and inspiring, and you're who you are, not despite your disability, but because disability is part of who you are.
Honestly, I don't know who I would be otherwise, so I can't separate those two things. Mm-hmm. And I think that's a lot like knowing more than one language sometimes. So think of how many people might insist or say something like, you need to speak English. At the same time, when we flip that script, I would think, I'm sorry that I can't also speak with you in Korean. Because I feel like it's the same thing almost of like, oh, there's this other thing that I have to adapt to what everyone else is doing.
Mm-hmm. People with disabilities adapt to the world that is not designed for them. Come to think about it, that's amazing. That's so powerful. And in a way, that's like so unfair. So I think we have...
It is. And that's why the world needs to be a more accessible place.
Exactly. And compared to South Korea, it's way more common here for the disabled to work at supermarkets, restaurants, and shopping malls. I've seen them and I was pleasantly surprised. Like, wow, I love this store because they've given chances to these people.
Me too. I love stores for the same reason. The research also shows that it's really good for the businesses. And they make more money. The public thinks good things about them, all sorts of other things too. So like, it seems like it's this really like we're good-hearted people, but from a business perspective, it's a smart
choice.
Thing.
Yes, exactly. Mm-hmm. I still see a lot of changes that need to happen and a lot of room for improvement. So what do you think needs to change and how can we bring that change together?
I think one of the biggest things is just that education piece. So even just the conversations that we're having. I haven't been in law practice since 2019, but I still meet with people all the time. I get to help people understand disability every single day, which is like the coolest job in the world.
You work for yourself?
I do.
So you're a boss?
I guess so.
What do you do exactly right now?
I mostly do public speaking, so I get to educate people.
On autism?
I do. On autism, I've taught college classes on autism. I also do consulting for big companies to help them do better at hiring autistic and other people with disabilities. Sometimes I even get to teach lawyers, which is even cooler. Mm-hmm. So I just have fun.
Oh, that's awesome. Let me know if you're interested in teaching a class on my school. I
would love to. I love teaching. I love teaching. I love adult learners. I love college students. I just love people who are curious.
Yeah, so I run a Ron's Life School where I teach English mainly, but we have life coaching classes and, law class. There's actually, I had a lawyer that had a class actually on my platform. But
that's so cool.
Yeah, I'm sure people will love to learn more about, diversity, neurodiversity, disability, autism, and everything like that.
That's all I want to do.
Yes.
And I feel like I'm able to make a bigger impact.
You are making a difference. That's beautiful. I think it's very unique that we get to see someone who is autistic and is so confident and articulate and, intelligent and all these things. My one concern is that I don't want to strengthen any more stereotypes about autism. Oh, your kid is autistic, then he must be a genius. I don't want to strengthen any more in any way.
It's just for people.
Right.
And everybody's different.
Surprisingly, it only takes, I think, 1 to 2 people to really break your stereotypes. I have...
Exactly.
Including you, I know 3 people that are autistic and they're all very different. And I think this interview is going to help people to understand autism better and just get to know who you are.
Exactly. That's all I hope.
And you said that you were proud to be the first openly autistic attorney, but it shouldn't make it to the news. And what does that mean and what inspired you to make this statement?
We have such low expectations of people with disabilities and autistic people. We assume that everyone's going to live at home forever or hide out in their parents' basements. And when we see this kind of stereotype being broken, we make a huge deal out of it. And the other reason I think it shouldn't be news is also when you think about who lawyers are, there's a lot of us. There's probably plenty of other autistic lawyers out there. I know plenty of them at this point in my life. I think it's just who's open because there is so much stigma. There's many reasons you don't share. Maybe you're afraid that you won't be able to get a job or people will discriminate against you. Because I'm open, other people realize that maybe it's safe for them to be open. Hopefully something I have done in my life makes it easier for someone else, or that somebody else doesn't have to face the same obstacles that I did.
Oh, I love that. Is there something that we should be careful with? Something that we need to really like
just treat us like people. Just treat
like
us like
any other
everyone else.
individual.
I would just say just like everyone else. Don't talk to me like I'm a little kid, because sometimes people do that. It's kind of weird.
Huh.
You know, like when you talk to like your dog or your cat and you talk to them like they're a child and like they're like a baby.
Yeah.
And you use like a baby voice, like that is great. But I will not do that to a person if I can help it, especially an adult person, even if they don't seem like they understand something.
Is there anything else that you would like to share with us?
I'm just really grateful to get to have these conversations because I feel like they're so needed. And it's also just fun.
It is so fun, and I can go on, and I have so many questions, but I know that it's
That's
like
okay.
past midnight there.
Oh my God. Hey, I don't mind it.
Yeah, I feel like this was such a rich conversation, and I had so much fun talking with you.
I did too. This has been fantastic and well worth staying up late for.
Yes, totally. And I hope that the viewers enjoyed our conversation as much. And if they leave comments, let's read them. And if we can, let's reply to some of them so that we can encourage discussion. And, you know, they're welcome to ask questions if they have any questions.
Absolutely. Sounds great.
Thank you so much for your time, and we'll talk again.
Thank you for having me. Bye, everyone. Until next time.